Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible story of Elena Ferrante, a soft-hearted waitress who loved to dance, just once. She couldn't resist the music playing in the restaurant and spun with a smile while serving a table of strangers. But one of those strangers wasn't ordinary. He was the most feared Mafia boss in Sicily. By the time the night ended, bullets had shattered the glass, and the man she accidentally danced for had said just 4 chilling words to his men: "Bring her to me." What happened next turned a simple moment of joy into a storm of danger. Love and redemption she could never escape. Elena Ferrante pivoted on her toes with a playful flourish, balancing a heavy tray above her shoulder as lively mandolin music danced through the warm evening air. The open-air terrace of La Luna Blu Trattoria was alive with laughter and clinking glasses. Under the soft glow of string lights, Elena couldn't resist swaying her hips to the infectious beat of a classic tarantella tune played by the local trio in the corner. A bright smile dimpled her cheeks as she spun lightly around an empty chair, drawing chuckles and applause from a nearby table of regulars. She had no idea that her carefree moment of dance, a simple joy on a summer night, had caught the unblinking attention of the most dangerous man in Palermo. At a corner table cloaked in shadow, Adriano Falcone watched the young waitress move with effortless grace. He lifted his espresso to his lips, masking the slight uptick of interest in his dark eyes. The air around Adriano was usually heavy with silence and fear, his presence enough to send most people averting their gazes. But Elena hadn't even noticed him yet, too absorbed in her rhythm as she delivered a tray of limoncello shots to the wrong table by mistake. The patrons there laughed kindly at her blushing apology, and she offered an embarrassed little curtsy, the hem of her blue skirt flaring. Adriano's lips curved a fraction. In a life defined by power and violence, it had been years since he'd seen such unguarded joy. Elena realized her slip-up and hurried to the correct table, cheeks warm. Her friend Marco behind the bar gave her a wink as if to say, "Nice moves." Elena pressed her finger to her lips in a playful shush, trying not to giggle. She knew dancing on the job was technically frowned upon, but the night was winding down and the guests loved it. Besides, how could she resist? Dancing was in her soul. Once upon a time, she dreamed of doing it on stage instead of between tables. Those dreams felt far away now, but in moments like this, with music in the air, she could still taste a piece of them. As she turned toward the kitchen, Elena finally felt an odd prickle along her neck. It was the sensation of being watched. Her eyes darted over the restaurant and landed on the corner table, half hidden in shadow. 3 men in tailored suits sat there. They had arrived late, speaking quietly among themselves. Tourists? No, their posture and presence told a different story. One of them, the one at the center nursing an espresso, was staring directly at her. Elena's breath hitched. The man's gaze was intensely focused, unreadable. Even in the dim light, she could make out the strong cut of his jaw and the penetrating set of his eyes. She quickly looked away, heart thumping faster. Something about him made her instinctively anxious. The last thing she needed was to offend a VIP customer by appearing unprofessional. She smoothed her apron and hurried to pick up another table's bill, forcing the strange encounter from her mind. From his table, Adriano set down his cup. Around him, his 2 lieutenants continued their low conversation about a pending shipment, but Adriano's attention had strayed to the young waitress. Elena, her name tag read. Her momentary dance had been a surprise delight, a spark of light in his otherwise grim day. He watched her now as she dutifully tended to another table, face composed but still carrying that natural warmth. He found himself wondering what had put that light in her eyes when she danced. "Boss?" One of the suited men, Rocco, ventured softly in Italian, noticing Adriano's distraction. "Everything all right?" Adriano flicked his gaze back to his men. They followed his line of sight briefly to the waitress. Rocco raised an eyebrow, but Adriano gave a minute shake of his head. It was nothing, just a passing curiosity. Still, he realized he was still holding the tiny porcelain espresso cup mid-air, forgotten. With a slight frown at himself, he placed it down. "Sì, tutto a posto," he murmured. Yes, everything is fine. But everything was not entirely fine, he reflected. This meeting was supposed to bring good news from his sources, yet there were whispers that Vincenzo Barone, his rival in the city's underworld, had been seen prowling around his territory. Tension in Palermo's criminal circles had been nearing a breaking point ever since Adriano inherited the Falcone family operations 6 months ago. Tonight, He'd come to this quieter part of town for a discreet discussion. La Luna Blue was known for its good food and relative privacy. He hadn't expected any sort of entertainment. His thoughts were interrupted when the restaurant's owner, Vito, approached the table to ask if they needed anything else. The older man's cordial smile was tight at the edges. He clearly recognized the caliber of guests at that corner table and was eager to keep them satisfied. Adriano requested the check with a polite nod. Though the night was pleasant, he had much to resolve. As Vito walked away, Adriano watched Elena one more time. She was by the bar now, handing in an order, still with that air of gentle enthusiasm. He noticed another thing. She was soft-hearted, evident in the way she spoke kindly to the busboy who looked exhausted, or how she paused to pat the shoulder of the elderly man at the table near the door, as she asked if he needed anything else. These small acts of care, performed so naturally, stood out to a man like Adriano, whose world seldom saw such tenderness. Elena felt the burn of that mysterious man's gaze again, as she finished her last tasks. She dared another glance while wiping down an empty table. He was standing now, smoothing out his suit jacket. Even from a distance, his stature was commanding. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura that made people instinctively get out of his way as he moved. One of his men laid a generous stack of cash on the table, payment for their meal, and another scanned the exits vigilantly. Who are these guys? Elena wondered. There was a dangerous edge to them, an alertness she couldn't miss. She tried to dispel her unease. It wasn't unusual to get shady characters occasionally. Palermo was a tapestry of travelers, businessmen, and yes, sometimes criminal figures. Elena had learned to mind her own business and treat every customer kindly regardless. Still, something about the man in the suit unsettled her, and not entirely in a bad way. Under the intimidation, there was something compelling. She shook her head. Get a grip, Elena. As she collected the empty limoncello glasses from a nearby table, Elena heard the clink of metal on glass. The man in the suit, Adriano, tapped a spoon against his espresso cup, just once, in an unmistakable gesture to get her attention. The soft ting made her jump slightly. She looked up to see him watching her directly, beckoning with a faint motion of his fingers. His face remained impassive, but those eyes bore into hers. Her stomach flipped. She set down the glasses and quickly straightened her uniform. Had she done something wrong? Was he about to reprimand her for practically dancing around the dining area like a fool? Vito, the owner, was across the room tallying receipts. He hadn't noticed the summons. For a second, Elena considered fetching him, but the man's gaze held her in place. He wasn't going to ask twice. Heart-thudding, she approached the shadowed corner. Each step felt heavy. The two other men stepped slightly aside, allowing her into their sphere with polite yet guarded expressions. Elena mustered a smile, clasping her hands to hide their trembling. Buonasera, signore. I apologize if I disturbed you earlier, she said softly in Italian, addressing Adriano, though her eyes flicked to his companions respectfully as well. Up close, Adriano Falcone was even more striking. Dark, wavy hair framed a strong, stubbled face. His suit was immaculate, the midnight blue fabric undoubtedly tailor-made. A subtle scar slashed through his left eyebrow, a thin white line that did nothing to diminish his severe handsomeness. Elena noticed he couldn't be much older than his mid-30s, yet his eyes carried a weight beyond those years. He studied her for a moment before speaking. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low and even. The power in that simple question sent a little chill along her skin. This was a voice used to giving orders. "Elena, sir. Elena Ferrante," she replied, swallowing hard. "Elena," he repeated as if testing how it felt. Her name sounded different in his mouth. Important somehow. "You like to dance, Elena?" She flushed, confirming her fear that he'd seen her little performance. "Forgive me, I got carried away when the music started. I didn't mean any disrespect," she stammered, twisting her fingers nervously. "It's just a bit of fun. If I bothered you, I truly apologize." Adriano's head tilted almost imperceptibly. "No need to apologize." "I wasn't bothered." He paused, letting her steady her breathing. "You dance very well." The compliment was unexpected, and Elena blinked in surprise. "Thank you," she managed, unsure what else to say. Was that why he'd called her over? To comment on her dancing? His intense scrutiny remained. "Is dancing what you truly love to do?" The question was oddly personal. Elena wasn't sure how to answer a stranger, a customer, about something so close to her heart. Her first instinct was to offer a polite, dismissive reply. but something in his tone suggested he actually wanted to know. She bit her lip and gave a small shrug. It was once. I trained when I was younger, but life took me in a different direction. She gestured lightly at the restaurant. Now I mostly dance when I think no one's watching. A self-conscious laugh escaped her as she realized she'd basically admitted to goofing off at work. To her relief, Adriano's hard expression softened a notch. Perhaps it was the tiniest smile at the corner of his mouth. I did not mean to intrude. I was merely curious, he said. You move with passion. It's rare to see such genuine joy. The way he said it, almost quietly, made Elena's chest flutter. There was a hint of melancholy there, or regret. Rocco and the other man exchanged a glance of mild confusion. This gentle small talk was unlike their boss. Adriano caught the look and cleared his throat, his demeanor shifting back to business. He reached into his jacket and pulled out several large bills from a money clip. With deliberate intent, he placed them on the tray Elena still held at her side. The stack was far more than their bill. Your dancing was worth the price of dinner, he said calmly. And more. Elena's eyes widened at the generous tip. Grazie, she began to stammer, but he raised a hand slightly to forestall her gratitude. Take it, Adriano insisted softly. Heat flooded Elena's cheeks, an odd mix of pride and discomfort. Such a huge tip, it felt like too much. I can't possibly accept— Please, Adriano said, voice gentle yet firm. Buy yourself something nice, or perhaps put it toward picking up dancing again. His hazel eyes glinted with a kind sincerity that completely disarmed her protests. Elena's lips parted, an emotion she couldn't name rising in her. Before she could find words, a commotion by the entrance stole both their attention. The front door of the trattoria burst open, hitting the wall with a loud thud. One of Adriano's men reacted instantly, stepping in front of Elena. Rocco's hand flew inside his jacket. In the doorway stood a burly figure with wild eyes and a handgun raised. For a split second, the entire restaurant froze at the sight of the weapon gleaming under the lights. Time slowed to a crawl. Elena's heart seized as she realized what was happening. Falcone, the intruder spat, his voice cracking with rage and adrenaline. He trained the pistol toward their corner. Adriano moved faster than seemed possible. In one fluid motion, he yanked Elena down behind the heavy wooden table, shielding her with his body as gunfire erupted. A deafening crack split the jovial music into terrified screams. Dishes shattered. The air filled with the acrid burn of gunpowder. Elena clapped her hands over her ears, eyes screwed shut, her back pressed against the wall where Adriano had pushed her. Another gunshot exploded, splintering a wine bottle on the table above them. Shards of glass rained down. Elena felt a sharp sting as a fragment nicked her forearm. Adriano's arm was around her shoulders, keeping her low. She could feel the tension in his muscles as he reached up with his free hand, drew a handgun from inside his jacket, and returned fire over the table in 2 thunderous blasts. The attacker dove aside, knocking over a chair as bullets thudded into the doorframe where he'd stood. Chaos swallowed the restaurant. Patrons screamed and ducked under tables. The band members scrambled for cover, one still clutching his mandolin as he hid behind a potted plant. Vito, the owner, yelled for everyone to get down, his voice panicked. Elena trembled violently, curling against Adriano's chest without thinking. She felt his heartbeat, steady and strong, even as gunshots ceased for a beat. He glanced down at her, his face tight with concern. Stai bene? Are you hurt? He asked quickly, eyes scanning her for injuries. I'm okay, Elena managed to gasp, though her ears rang, and that cut on her arm burned. Fear had turned her limbs to jelly. What's happening? Her voice was barely a whisper. Adriano's jaw clenched. Stay down, he ordered. Carefully, he peered around the table's edge. The front door was swinging shut. The gunman had retreated outside. Rocco was already creeping forward, gun drawn, using an upturned table as cover. The third man, Sandro, was by the window, signaling to someone outside. For one surreal moment, silence fell, broken only by whimpers and the distant wail of a car alarm set off by the shots. Elena's world narrowed to the protective weight of Adriano's arm and the adrenaline pounding in her veins. This wasn't just a robbery or a random act of violence. The gunman had shouted Falcone. He'd come for Adriano. Adriano gently released Elena. Stay here, he murmured, fixing her with a serious look. Don't move. Before she could protest, he was gone, crouching low and moving to join his men. Elena remained where she was, pressed against the wall, her mind racing. Her eyes darted across the restaurant. Several customers were injured by flying glass, but it looked like no one had been hit by a bullet. Thank God. She felt warmth trickling down her forearm and realized blood was oozing from the cut. Elena tore a strip from her apron and wrapped it tightly around her arm, hands shaking. She peeked over the table just in time to see Adriano and his men slip out through the side door into the alley in pursuit of the attacker. The next moment, the sound of an engine revving and screeching tires echoed from outside. "They're gone," someone near the broken window said shakily. "Dio mio. They're gone." A few patrons began to emerge from hiding, bruised and stunned. Vito rushed to help the elderly couple by the door, who were rattled but unharmed. Elena exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her legs felt numb as she carefully stood up. The dining area was a mess of spilled drinks, broken glass, and overturned chairs. The festive ambiance had been shattered into a nightmare in an instant. She stepped forward on unsteady feet. A hand caught her elbow. It was Marco from the bar, his face pale. "Elena, are you hurt?" he asked urgently, eyeing the improvised bandage on her arm. "It's just a scratch," she managed, though her own voice sounded far away to her ears. What just happened?" She looked around in a daze. "Is everyone okay?" "I think so," Marco replied, the shock evident in his eyes. "That maniac. He was shooting at those men you were talking to." "Did you know them?" Elena shook her head emphatically. No, I just..." Her gaze drifted to their corner table. The cash and the check still lay there amid splattered wine. "I was just serving them." She didn't mention the odd conversation or the massive tip. Her mind was reeling too much to explain. Before Marco could ask more, flashing blue lights spilled through the front windows. Police sirens wailed as 2 carabinieri vehicles screeched to a halt outside the restaurant. Uniformed officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting orders for anyone inside to come out with their hands visible. Vito hurried to meet them at the entrance, waving frantically. "Aiuto, help! We've had a shooting!" His voice carried as he led officers in. Patrons began clamoring, everyone desperate to explain at once. Elena felt a swell of panic rise anew. The police would want statements. They would want to know what happened. She was one of the closest witnesses. But what could she even say? That a stranger had attacked another stranger? And Adriano? Her eyes darted to the side door where he'd disappeared. Would he get away? Was he even alive? As if in answer, the side door suddenly opened, and Adriano strode back in, flanked by Rocco and Sandro. A collective hush fell in the room at the reappearance of the men who had been the target of the attack. The 2 lieutenants quickly holstered their weapons under their jackets. One of the officers cursed under his breath, recognizing the notorious figures now calmly standing amid the wreckage. Elena's pulse quickened with relief and apprehension. Adriano was alive, unharmed as far as she could tell, though his expression was thunderous. His eyes immediately sought out Elena across the room. The intensity in them made her heart lurch. A silent question passed between them. "Are you okay?" "Yes, are you?" Before either could move or speak, a police sergeant stepped forward, gun still drawn. "Adriano Falcone," he barked, a mix of nerves and contempt in his voice. "Don't move. Drop any weapons you have now." A tense standoff loomed. The other officers trained their pistols at the 3 men. Rocco's jaw tightened. He glanced at Adriano for direction. The restaurant staff and patrons huddled together, watching fearfully. Elena's head spun. Falcone. She'd heard that name uttered by the gunman and now by the police. It clicked at last. She knew of the Falcone family in passing. Whispers of Mafia, dangerous dealings, and this man at the center of it, Adriano Falcone, newly made boss of the Falcone clan. A chill ran through her. She had been speaking casually with a Mafia boss moments before bullets flew. Adriano slowly raised his hands to shoulder height, palms open. He nodded to Rocco and Sandro, who grudgingly did the same. "We are unarmed now. We only defended ourselves," Adriano said to the police, voice measured. "The shooter fled." The sergeant signaled, and 2 officers cautiously approached the men, removing Rocco and Sandro's guns from their shoulder holsters. As they patted Adriano down, he remained eerily calm, eyes narrowed. Elena could see the barely leashed anger rolling off him, but he was cooperating for now. Another officer spoke up. "We have reports of gunfire. Who was the shooter? Is anyone hurt?" Rapid chatter broke out as patrons pointed and explained. Over the din, Elena caught fragments. Came in shooting. He was after them. She nearly got shot. It took her a moment to realize she was being pointed at as well. The elderly lady she'd served earlier was gesturing toward Elena and speaking rapidly to a female officer, likely telling how Adriano had pulled her down and saved her life. Elena felt heat flood her. She suddenly became conscious of the blood seeping through her apron bandage again, a telltale sign she was indeed injured, if slightly. One of the police, a younger man, approached her quickly. "Signorina, you're hurt. Let's get you outside. Medics are on the way," he said, guiding her by the elbow. "I'm fine," she insisted softly, though her legs were shaking. Her eyes stayed on Adriano even as the officer tried to usher her out. Adriano, now freed from the frisk, caught her gaze. In that brief instant, his eyes softened in relief seeing her stand, but then hardened as two police began questioning him. This was all wrong. They were questioning him when he'd just been attacked. And if they held him here, who knew if the shooter would come back for another attempt? The thought made Elena's blood run cold, and to her own surprise, protective worry spiked through her. As the officer at her side tried again to coax her toward the door, Elena found her voice. "Well, wait," she stammered, pulling gently away. She stepped forward, raising her voice to address the cluster of police. "Officers, that man saved our lives." All eyes turned to her, the frightened waitress with blood on her sleeve. Her heart hammered, but she pressed on, motioning at Adriano. He and his friends were just having dinner when the shooter barged in. "If they hadn't reacted, many of us could be hurt or worse. He protected me." Her voice caught as emotion welled, remembering the way he'd thrown himself in front of her. "He protected all of us." The sergeant eyed her skeptically. "Miss, you should step outside. We'll handle this." Elena stood her ground, surprising even herself. "Please, listen. Whoever attacked was after them specifically." He shouted Mr. Falcone's name. "These men were defending themselves. They didn't harm anyone here." She realized she was practically pleading for the police to let them go, but it felt unjust that the hero in this scenario could be treated like a criminal at this moment. A few patrons murmured agreement. The elderly couple nodded vigorously. The officers exchanged looks, uncertain. Technically, Adriano and his men had discharged firearms in public, a crime in itself, and they were known Mafia suspects. But they also had a restaurant full of witnesses claiming their actions were protective. The sergeant lowered his gun but kept a hardened gaze on Adriano. "We'll need all of you to come down to the station for statements." He signaled to his men to start taking names. Rocco muttered under his breath, unhappy. Sandro remained stone-faced. Adriano glanced at Elena, a silent thank you in his eyes for speaking up. He then addressed the sergeant firmly. "Officer, with all due respect, the man who did this is still out there. My men and I are the targets. The longer we stay here, the more everyone else is at risk." "That's for us to worry about, not you," the sergeant retorted. Almost on cue, a crackle came from the police radios. "All units, shots fired at Via Garibaldi intersection. Possible gang activity. Suspect on motorcycle heading north." The officers looked at each other. Via Garibaldi was just 2 streets away. "Barone's men," Adriano said sharply, his first hint of open anger. "He's trying to draw you away while we're sitting ducks." The sergeant's radio flared again with urgent chatter about a high-speed chase nearby. He cursed. Splitting resources was risky. Holding Falcone here might become a bloodbath if more shooters came. Finally, the sergeant holstered his weapon. "Go," he barked at the junior officers. "Back up the chase. We have it here." 3 officers rushed out to their cars, engines revving as they sped off to pursue the new crisis. The sergeant eyed Adriano, weighing his decision. "Falcone, I can't have you running wild in my city, but I also don't need a war in this restaurant. I'll take your statement now and then you leave. Quickly." His tone left no room for argument. It was a grudging compromise. Adriano inclined his head. He swiftly gave a curt statement. "A man tried to kill us. He got away on a motorcycle. We defended ourselves." He kept it minimal. Rocco and Sandro did likewise under the officer's pointed glare. When it was Elena's turn, she stepped forward, voice steadier now. She described how the shooter burst in and opened fire at them. She confirmed again that Adriano saved her, pulling her out of harm's way. As she recounted it, she realized her hands were trembling. Adriano was watching her intently, concern etched on his face. The sergeant finished jotting notes and nodded slowly. "All right. You 3 out!" He jabbed a finger at Adriano's men. "And you," he added at Adriano. "I don't want to see you again. If Barone is after you, take it far from the city, capisci?" Adriano's jaw tightened at the disrespectful tone, but he merely gave a slight nod. "Let's go," he murmured to his men. Rocco and Sandro immediately headed for the exit, slipping past the gawking onlookers. Adriano turned to follow, but paused beside Elena. Up close, he looked torn between concern and something more tender that he was fighting to suppress in public. His voice dropped so only she could hear. "Thank you, Elena. You didn't have to speak for us." Elena felt a flush of warmth despite the chaos. She met his eyes and offered a faint, sincere smile. "Of course I did. You saved me first." For the first time, she saw the hardness in his expression ease into true warmth. He gently lifted her hand, the one with her arm wound, inspecting the bloodied makeshift bandage. "Have a doctor look at that," he said quietly, worry evident. "I will," she promised. The simple kindness in his gesture made her chest ache. His fingers squeezed hers ever so lightly, then he stepped back. In a blink, the guarded mask slid back over his features as he inclined his head politely and left with purposeful strides. Elena found herself staring at the door long after the three men vanished into the night, her heart fluttering in the aftermath of everything that had transpired in just a few short minutes. The police continued to secure the scene and take detailed reports from others, but Elena felt oddly detached now. The adrenaline was ebbing, leaving her dazed and exhausted. Marco gently guided her to sit on a chair. "That was incredibly brave, what you did. Talking to the police like that," he said softly. She shook her head. "I just told the truth." Her eyes drifted to the bundle of money still on what remained of Adriano's table. In the confusion, it had been forgotten. Slowly, Elena rose and went to gather it, ignoring Marco's puzzled look. She took the bills and slipped them into her apron pocket. Something told her Adriano had meant what he said, that she should have it. And after tonight, the thought of being able to support her mother and kid sister with that tip eased at least one worry from her mind. Eventually, statements were done, and medics checked the minor injuries. Elena's cut was cleaned and bandaged properly. The police cleared out after an hour, leaving the trattoria eerily quiet and wrecked. It was well past midnight when Elena finally stepped outside into the balmy Sicilian night. The street was nearly empty now, just a few lingering officers and curious neighbors behind their shutters. The warm breeze touched her face, carrying the salty hint of the Mediterranean Sea only a few blocks away. Under any other circumstances, it might have been a beautiful night for a stroll, but now the memories of gunfire and that harrowing embrace on the floor intruded on the peace. "Elena!" a voice called from behind. She turned to see Vito locking up the broken door. "Let me walk you home, figlia mia," he offered kindly, using an endearment meaning, "my daughter." The older man's face was worn with worry. "After what happened, I don't want you alone out here." Usually, Elena would politely refuse such an offer out of independence, but tonight she gratefully accepted. Her legs still felt like they might give out at any moment. As they walked slowly down the street, Vito shook his head. "What a night. I never imagined Barone's men would cause trouble in my little place. I'm sorry you had to go through that." "You know that name too?" Elena asked quietly. "Barone," Vito sighed. "Everyone in Palermo knows to stay clear of those two names, Falcone and Barone. A turf war, they say." He eyed her bandaged arm with concern. "Thank God you weren't hurt worse. That Falcone, he may be what he is, but he did right by you and everyone." Elena nodded, her thoughts far away. She could still feel the imprint of Adriano's arm around her from when he shielded her. He had been so solid, so sure in the face of danger. And yet, when he spoke to her, there was a gentleness entirely unexpected. The way he had thanked her, touched her hand. Her cheeks warmed again remembering it. It dawned on her that she might never see him again. He was a Mafia boss, heading back into the shadows, into his dangerous world. She was just a waitress who'd had a brush with that world by pure chance. It was foolish to feel a pang of disappointment at that thought. But there it was, a faint ache in her chest. At the corner by her apartment building, Elena thanked Vito for escorting her. He gave her a fatherly pat on the shoulder. "Try to rest, Elena. Don't let this scare you away from coming back. The city needs kind souls like you." She promised she'd be in tomorrow to help clean up, though he protested she should take a day off. Then he left her with a gentle wave. Elena climbed the narrow stairs to her flat, each step heavier than the last. Her small apartment was dark and quiet. She flipped on a lamp, illuminating modest furnishings and a few framed photos of her family in happier times. In the stillness, the night's events crashed over her in full. Tremors started in her hands, and soon she was sinking onto her little sofa, sobbing soundlessly into her palms. It was all too much. The terror of the shooting, the shock of learning who Adriano was, the moral confusion of feeling protected by a man she had been taught to fear if ever encountered. And underneath it, that unspoken connection when he looked at her. Elena cried until she had no tears left. When finally she drifted to sleep just before dawn, one image followed her into her dreams. Adriano's eyes in the moment he asked if she was hurt, the fierce concern of a man who barely knew her, yet seemed ready to go to war for her. It made no sense, and yet it felt profoundly significant. Little did Elena know, beyond the reach of the streetlights, a black sedan was parked under the cover of a sycamore tree across from her building. Inside, Adriano sat in the back seat, shrouded in darkness. He had watched the lights in her apartment flicker on, then off again an hour later. Only then, once he was certain she was safely home, had he allowed Rocco to drive on. As the car pulled away into the night, Adriano's thoughts remained on the brave young waitress who had danced her way into peril. He silently vowed it would be the last time danger ever brushed against her radiant light, a light he desperately wanted to see again. For reasons he was only beginning to grasp, Adriano Falcone knew he could not simply let Elena Ferrante slip away from his world. Not after tonight. The next morning dawned golden and calm, belying the turmoil of the night before. Elena woke late, her body sore from tension, and her sleep haunted by half-remembered nightmares. Sunlight filtered through the white lace curtains of her small bedroom. For a moment she lay there in the quiet, unsure if the previous night had been real or some fever dream. But the bandage on her arm and the distant ache in her heart confirmed it. It had all happened. She rose and got ready slowly, catching herself pausing at the mirror as she recalled Adriano's gentle touch on her hand. A flush warmed her cheeks. Stop it, she chided her reflection. Whatever odd connection she thought she felt, it was absurd. He was a Mafia boss, living a life worlds apart from her own. And yet, he had watched over her until she got home. That much she was oddly sure of. She'd sensed a presence in the dark street, seen the hint of a familiar car when she peered out her window at 3 a.m. It had made her feel safe enough to finally sleep. Elena shook her head, trying to dispel thoughts of him. There were practical matters to attend to. Vito had closed the trattoria for the day to clean up and repair the damage. Elena decided she would stop by later with some fresh bread or sweets for everyone helping. Keeping busy was better than sitting alone replaying terrifying memories. After a quick shower, she dressed in a light floral blouse and jeans, slipping on her comfortable sandals. She tied her dark hair up in a ponytail. The mirror revealed the shadows under her brown eyes from lack of rest. With a sigh, she applied a touch of concealer and lip gloss, small rituals of normalcy. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother in Messina. Buongiorno. Heard about shooting in Palermo on the news. Are you okay? Elena's stomach clenched. News had already spread far enough to reach her mother's ears. I'm fine, Mama, she typed back. Was close by, but I'm safe. She hesitated, then added, don't worry. She knew her mother would anyway. Teresa Ferrante worried about her eldest daughter living alone in the city even on a good day. Elena grabbed her tote bag and headed out. The stairwell still smelled of last night's summer heat, and a hint of someone's cooking from breakfast. As she stepped onto the narrow street, she glanced around out of habit. The morning bustle was underway, vendors opening their shops, a few scooters zipping by on errands. Nothing seemed amiss. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched that had lingered since last night. Perhaps trauma had made her paranoid. She forced herself to breathe deeply. Her first stop was a corner bakery where she bought a large box of cornetti, sweet croissants, to bring to the restaurant. The owner's wife, Rosa, handed her the box with a sympathetic look. I heard what happened at La Luna Blu, Cara. You must have been scared out of your wits. Elena mustered a smile. It was intense. But I'm okay now. Grazie, Rosa. She didn't want to linger and recount anything, so she gave a quick wave and left. Balancing the pastry box, Elena made her way toward the trattoria. As she turned onto a quieter side street, she noticed it was oddly empty. No people, just parked cars baking in the sun. Her sandal footsteps echoed lightly. Halfway down, a black van was idling at the curb, its engine gently rumbling. Perhaps a delivery, But there were no shops here, just residential buildings with shuttered windows at this hour. A prickle of unease danced up her spine. She quickened her pace, hugging the box of pastries to her chest. The van's passenger door suddenly swung open. 2 men stepped out onto the sidewalk, moving with deliberate intent. Too deliberate. "Elena Ferrante?" one asked briskly. He was tall and bald, with sunglasses reflecting the morning light. The other man was stocky, cracking his knuckles. Elena froze a few yards away. How did they know her name? They weren't police. Plainclothes maybe. But something about their stance screamed trouble. Every instinct told her to run. I'm sorry, I'm late," she stammered, pretending misunderstanding, and took a step back to retreat. The bald man's lips curved into a tight smirk. "Don't make this difficult." He darted forward suddenly, reaching for her arm. The pastry box tumbled from Elena's grasp as she whirled and bolted back the way she came. "Ayudo, help!" she cried out, hoping someone, anyone, would hear. She barely made it a few steps. A powerful hand snatched her ponytail, yanking her backwards. Pain lanced across her scalp as she was dragged against the stocky man's chest. He clamped a meaty arm around her torso, pinning her arms to her sides. Elena kicked and thrashed. "Let go of me!" she screamed, voice high with panic. The street remained empty. No savior emerged from the closed doors around them. The bald thug strode over, pulling a cloth from his pocket. Elena's eyes went wide with terror, recognizing the acrid smell of chemicals, chloroform. She held her breath and fought harder, twisting her body and stamping down with all her might on the foot of the man restraining her. He snarled in pain, loosening his grip a fraction. It was enough for Elena to rip an arm free and elbow him viciously in the gut. He grunted, and the arm around her loosened. Elena stumbled forward, nearly free. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed down the alley-like street. The bald man yelped and stumbled, the cloth falling from his hand. Behind him, the side mirror of the van exploded into shards. A bullet had struck it, inches from his head. "Alzate le mani! Hands up now!" a voice roared from behind Elena. Dazed and panting, she turned her head to see 2 figures at the mouth of the street. One she recognized immediately, Rocco, Adriano's lieutenant, pistol raised and steady. Beside him stood Adriano himself, his stance radiating lethal fury, a sleek handgun leveled at the thugs. The 2 kidnappers hesitated only a heartbeat. The bald man dove behind the van, scrambling for cover. The stocky one released Elena and shoved her hard toward the wall, trying to reach for a weapon at his waist. Elena hit the wall with a cry, the breath knocked out of her. Before the thug could draw, a thunderous gunshot cracked. The stocky man screamed, collapsing to his knees. Rocco had hit his shoulder with surgical precision. Blood blossomed across the thug's sleeve as he crumpled, swearing. The bald man, now crouched behind the van's open door, fired blindly in their direction. The shot pinged off stone, missing by a wide margin. Pedestrians at the far end of the street screamed and ducked away, fleeing the sudden firefight. Adriano pressed forward with uncanny calm, moving in front of Rocco, his own firearm trained on the van. Elena, shaking off her shock, saw the bald assailant pop up to take aim at Adriano. Her heart seized. "Look out!" she shouted. Adriano was faster. He pivoted smoothly and fired twice. The muzzle flashes were bright in the morning sun, the reports deafening in the narrow lane. Tires hissed as bullets punctured the van's front tire, then its back tire, ensuring it wasn't going anywhere. The bald man ducked down again with a curse. Rocco surged forward to Elena's side, keeping his gun on the van. "Come with me, signorina, now," he urged, grabbing her arm firmly but not unkindly. She was trembling so hard her knees felt gelatinous, but she stumbled alongside him away from the immediate line of fire. Adriano kept his focus on the pinned attacker. "Drop your weapon and come out and maybe you live," he barked in a voice that brooked no argument. For a moment there was silence. Then the bald man's pistol clattered to the asphalt, sliding out from behind the van. He emerged, hands raised, a scowl on his face. Adriano closed the distance in 3 strides. In a blur of motion, he slammed the man against the van with one hand and pressed the barrel of his gun under his chin. His voice dropped to a lethal whisper that sent chills down Elena's spine, even from several paces away. "Who sent you?" The thug's bravado faltered under those murderous eyes. His jaw clenched, but he remained silent. Adriano clicked the safety off with an audible snick. "Baroni?" Adriano hissed the name like a curse. "If you value breathing, answer me." The man's resolve shattered. "Si, Barone," he spat out. Vincenzo Barone wanted the girl. We were just told to bring her alive." Elena's stomach churned at the confirmation that she'd been targeted specifically. Adriano's expression was a mix of cold rage and something deeply personal, as if the thought of Barone laying hands on her ignited every protective instinct he had. He eased the gun pressure slightly. And Barone, where is he now? The thug shook his head frantically. No lo so, I don't know. He moves around. He just gave the order. Adriano's finger twitched on the trigger. For a terrifying second, Elena thought he might execute the man right there. The bald thug squeezed his eyes shut, a whimper escaping him. Boss, Rocco interjected in a low tone, a cautionary note. They could hear distant sirens now. Someone had alerted the police about the gunshots. With a grunt of disgust, Adriano knocked the thug out cold with a swift crack of his pistol's handle to the temple. The man slumped to the ground. Adriano then strode over to the stocky kidnapper who was still groaning on the sidewalk, clutching his wounded shoulder. Without ceremony, Adriano kicked away the fallen thug's gun and fixed him with an icy glare. You're lucky we don't have time to stay, he growled quietly, before delivering a sharp blow to the side of the man's head, rendering him unconscious as well. Elena stood a few steps back, chest heaving, hands pressed to her mouth. The entire encounter had lasted mere seconds, but it left her mind reeling. If Adriano and Rocco hadn't arrived exactly when they did, she couldn't even finish the thought. Adriano turned to her, holstering his gun at the small of his back. His face was tight with concern. Elena, he said, almost a sigh of relief. He reached for her gently. Did they hurt you? She shook her head, finding her voice. No, just a little shaken. That was an understatement. She was quivering head to toe. He noticed, and without hesitation, he removed his suit jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The gesture was oddly tender, given the violence that had just unfolded. You're safe now, he assured, his hands resting on her arms a moment, as if to pass his strength into her. Elena clutched the jacket to herself, the fabric still warm from his body, and nodded gratefully. His steady presence was the anchor she desperately needed. Rocco, meanwhile, had quickly stowed his weapon and stepped back, pulling out a phone. We need to go, boss. The polizia will be here any minute, he warned, eyeing the end of the street where onlookers were no doubt reporting the incident. Adriano grimaced, knowing the trouble that could arise if they were caught at another crime scene. He placed a protective arm around Elena's back. Come with me, he said quietly, an intensity in his tone that left no room for argument, but also conveyed genuine worry. This time Elena did not resist. She understood implicitly that staying here would only invite more danger and questions she couldn't answer. Wordlessly, she allowed Adriano to guide her swiftly down the street in the opposite direction of the sirens, with Rocco flanking them vigilantly. They rounded a corner and Elena spotted a dark blue Maserati idling under an acacia tree. Sandro sat behind the wheel, and his eyes widened at the sight of Elena with them. Without delay, he hopped out and opened the rear door. Adriano helped Elena in, then slid in beside her. Rocco took the front passenger seat. The moment the door shut, Sandro accelerated smoothly away, just as two police cars turned onto the street they had vacated. The wail of sirens faded behind them as they merged into the flow of city traffic, casual and unremarkable. Elena sank back into the leather seat, heart still hammering. She realized she was still clutching Adriano's jacket around her. It smelled faintly of his cologne, a woodsy, dark scent that was oddly soothing. She drew in a shaky breath and looked over at him. Adriano's expression was stormy, jaw tight as he stared ahead. There was silence in the car for a minute, the only sound the rush of air conditioning and the hum of the engine. Finally, Elena found the courage to speak, her voice trembling. They knew my name. They were waiting for me. Adriano turned his gaze to her, the hard mask melting into something pained. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Barone must have learned who you were. Possibly from one of his goons at the restaurant or other means. He didn't mention that a mole in his own ranks was a possibility he'd considered overnight. He thought to use you as leverage. Elena swallowed the lump in her throat. Leverage to get to you. It wasn't a question. Pieces were falling into place, no matter how surreal. This is because you saved me last night? A muscle in his cheek twitched. Because I showed that I cared whether you lived or died, he replied, voice low and rough with anger and regret. In my world, any perceived attachment becomes a target. He looked away, hands flexing on his knees as if the very thought enraged him. You were caught in this because of me. I never should have. Don't, Elena interjected softly, surprising them both. She reached a tentative hand toward his forearm. Don't blame yourself for doing the right thing. Twice now. You've saved me. Her eyes glistened with a mix of gratitude and lingering fear. I can't fault you for that. Adriano searched her face, his own drawn with self-reproach. He covered her hand with his, the contact sending a reassuring warmth through Elena. Nonetheless, you're in danger now, he said, voice determined. And I will not let Barone or anyone else near you again. We're taking you somewhere safe. Elena mustered a faint smile. Safer than my apartment, I hope. Despite everything, Adriano's lips quirked at her attempt at humor. Much safer. It's an old family villa outside the city. Off the grid. Only my most trusted people know of it. She nodded, relief and anxiety swirling within, being whisked away to a secret hideout with a Mafia boss. This was not how she imagined her day when she woke up. I should have listened, she admitted in a small voice. You warned me there was a risk. I didn't want to believe it. Adriano's eyes softened. You couldn't have known Barone would act so fast. His tone turned bitter. He's getting desperate. And reckless. To try something in broad daylight. He'll pay for that. A shiver went through Elena at the feral edge that crept into his last words, but she also realized something. His anger was largely on her behalf. He was furious that someone had dared harm her. The thought was both frightening and strangely comforting. As the city streets gave way to coastal roads lined with olive groves, Elena allowed herself to relax slightly. Exhaustion from the adrenaline crash tugged at her. She leaned back, her shoulder brushing Adriano's. He didn't move away. Instead, he gently adjusted the jacket around her, as if tucking her in. You should rest, he said quietly. It's about an hour's drive. We'll make sure no one follows. Elena realized then that Rocco and Sandro were keeping a close eye on the mirrors, their posture tense. No one spoke of it, but she could feel the layer of security encasing the car. She was encircled by watchful protectors. Thank you, she whispered, not just for the suggestion of rest, but for everything. Her eyes felt heavy now that the immediate danger had passed. In the safety of the car, with Adriano's jacket warm around her and his presence solid by her side, the adrenaline drained away, leaving only fatigue. As her eyelids drooped, Elena felt a light pressure as Adriano's hand brushed a stray lock of hair off her forehead. The gesture was almost tender. She thought she heard him murmur, I've got you. But it was hard to tell as she finally let herself slip into a light doze, trusting him more than she ever thought possible. Elena woke to the crunch of gravel under tires and the sudden absence of motion. She blinked, disoriented for a moment by her unfamiliar surroundings. The car had pulled to a stop in front of wrought iron gates that were opening slowly. Beyond them, a cypress-lined driveway curved up toward a villa perched on a gentle hill. We're here, Adriano said softly beside her. He'd remained in the back with her the whole ride, and now offered a steadying hand on her back as she straightened up. She peered out the window. The villa was beautiful, if a bit time-worn. Sun-bleached sandstone walls draped with bougainvillea, terracotta roof tiles, and a small fountain in the courtyard that sparkled in the midday sun. The sea glimmered in the distance beyond the hills. It looked peaceful, like a postcard of old Sicily, far removed from the gritty city. As the car rolled through the gates and up the drive, Elena felt tension she hadn't realized she was holding start to ease. The quiet here was soothing, broken only by cicadas and birdsong. It truly felt off the grid. Sandro parked in the courtyard, and Rocco was out first, doing a quick scan of the premises like the consummate bodyguard. Satisfied, he opened the back door for Adriano and Elena. The heat of midday was tempered by a gentle sea breeze as Elena stepped out. She swayed slightly, still groggy, and realized with mild embarrassment that she had slept with her head tipped onto Adriano's shoulder. A small damp spot from her tears or drool, she prayed not drool, marked his crisp shirt. If he noticed, he didn't mention it. Instead, Adriano placed a guiding hand at the small of her back as they headed to the villa's entrance. Welcome to my home. Or one of them, he said almost shyly. This one belonged to my mother's side of the family. It's more of a refuge than a residence these days. It's lovely, Elena replied. And it was, though perhaps it had seen better days. The gardens were a bit overgrown, and some shutters hung ajar, but the place had character and a quiet grandeur that made her instantly feel more at ease. At the heavy wooden front door, A petite older woman in a simple dress bustled out, wiping her hands on an apron, her face lit with relief upon seeing Adriano. "Mio Dio, Adriano bene, you're safe," she exclaimed. Then her eyes fell on Elena in surprise. Adriano gave a half smile. "I'm fine, Grazia. We have a guest. This is Signorina Ferrante, Elena. She'll be staying with us for a while." He glanced at Elena. "Grazia has been the housekeeper here since I was a boy. She's practically family." Grazia's warm, lined face broke into a kind smile. "Any guest of Adriano's is welcome. Come in, dear. Let's get you settled." The older woman's eyes darted to the bandage on Elena's arm and the residual stress in her expression. Without another word, Grazia took Elena's hand gently and ushered her inside with a maternal fussiness. "You poor thing, you look exhausted. I'll make you something to eat, yes? And perhaps some lemonade. You need sugar in your blood after a shock." Elena found herself nodding, comforted by Grazia's doting. The entry hall was cool and dim, with old family portraits on the walls and a tile mosaic underfoot. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and herbs. Adriano gave Rocco a look and a subtle nod. The lieutenant understood, moving off to discreetly make security arrangements around the property and check in with the other men. Meanwhile, Adriano stayed close to Elena as Grazia guided them to a cozy sitting room that opened onto a shaded veranda. Sit, Grazia insisted, pointing Elena to a plush sofa. "Lunch will be ready soon. Adriano, make yourself useful and fetch the first aid kit from the kitchen, That bandage needs changing." It was strange to see the formidable Mafia boss obey meekly, but Adriano did so without protest. Once he disappeared down the hall, Grazia patted Elena's knee gently. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and kindness. "Forgive me for saying, but it's been a long time since Adriano brought anyone here, especially a bella ragazza like you." She winked conspiratorially. "He must care a great deal." Elena felt her face burn. "Oh, I wouldn't presume." She didn't know how to explain the situation in simple terms. "It's a bit of a complicated story," Grazia chuckled. "With men like him, it usually is. But I've known Adriano since he was in diapers. Whatever mess he's in, if he's put you under his wing, he'll move heaven and earth to protect you." Elena absorbed that, twisting her fingers in her lap. There was no denying how far he'd already gone to keep her safe. Twice now he'd risked his life. Why? The question she hadn't dared ask lingered in her mind. Could Grazia be right? Did he truly care for her, beyond just feeling responsible because she got caught in his war? Adriano returned with a small first aid box in hand, and Grazia excused herself to the kitchen to give them privacy and prepare food. He knelt in front of Elena, taking her injured arm gently. "May I?" he asked softly. She nodded. He carefully unwrapped the soiled bandage. The cut, though not deep, was surrounded by some redness and a few glass splinters still embedded. "This might sting," he warned as he picked up tweezers from the kit and began to remove the tiny shards of glass left from last night. His touch was precise yet delicate. Elena hissed slightly in pain at the antiseptic that followed, and Adriano murmured an apology, blowing softly on the cleaned wound to ease the burn. The intimacy of it made her heart flutter. Here was a man capable of ruthless violence, now tending to her with such tenderness that it nearly brought tears to her eyes. As he secured a fresh bandage over the cut, Elena found the courage to speak the thought weighing on her. "Why are you doing all this for me, Adriano?" His hands paused, then finished tying off the bandage. He didn't look up immediately. When he did, the guarded wall in his eyes was lowered, revealing honesty and a hint of vulnerability. "I asked myself the same thing last night," he admitted quietly. "After the shooting, I could have walked away. That would have been the sensible thing. For both of us." Elena's heart skipped at the idea of never seeing him again after that moment. She remained silent, letting him continue. "I stayed at your apartment building until morning," he confessed, confirming her suspicion. "I told myself it was just to be sure Baroni didn't try something overnight, but watching your light go out, knowing you were finally resting, it gave me a peace I haven't felt in a long time." He took a breath, searching her face as if afraid of what he might see there. "I barely know you, but from the first moment I saw you dancing in that restaurant, you reminded me what life could be like outside of all this." He gestured vaguely, meaning the violence, the criminal empire, the endless caution, your kindness, your courage. "It's pulled something out of me I thought was gone." He hesitated, then said softly, I don't want that feeling to go away. And I can't stand the thought of anything happening to you. So I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe, if you'll allow me." Elena felt a tear slip down her cheek. Adriano lifted a hand, his thumb gently brushing it away, sending a warm shiver through her. "I've been so afraid," she whispered, voice trembling. "But with you, I feel safe, Adriano. And that's terrifying in its own way, because I shouldn't trust you. I shouldn't even be here. Yet I am." He nodded, understanding the conflict in her. "If you want to leave—" "No," she interjected, surprising them both with her firmness. "I don't want to go. Not until this is over and I know it's safe. And even then," she faltered, biting her lip. "I don't know what I want beyond that, except I don't want you to get hurt either. This fight with Barone, what if you—" She couldn't finish, her voice choking on the possibility of him not making it out. Adriano's eyes darkened. He covered her hand with his. "Barone has taken enough from me. I won't let him take my future as well." There was steel in his voice, and also a promise. "We will end this, Elena, and when we do, I hope you'll be there when the dust settles." The unspoken meaning hung between them. Elena managed a smile through her tears. "Just don't expect me to stay on the sidelines if there's something I can do to help." A wry smile tugged at his lips. "Stubborn woman, you remind me of my sister." He chuckled softly at her puzzled look. "Lucia. She was a few years older than me. Fiercely kind like you. Always got in my business when I'd scrap with other boys." His smile faded into a distant sadness. "Barone's family took her away from us. A stray bullet, in an attack meant for my father, killed her when she was just 16. Elena inhaled sharply. "Adriano, I'm so sorry." She squeezed his hand. He nodded in silent thanks and continued, voice raw. "After that, my father became obsessed with vengeance. And when he was killed last year, another Barone hit, I inherited a war. I never wanted this life, not like this. But leaving wasn't an option. The people who remained loyal to my family were targets too if I ran, so I stepped up for them, for what was left of us." A heavy silence settled, broken only when he quietly added, "Lucia used to dance around the house. She loved music. After she died, there was no more dancing in our halls. Seeing you at the restaurant, it woke up that memory. It was beautiful. I think that's why I noticed you so strongly." Elena's throat tightened. In that moment, she saw the grief etched in his soul, the weight he carried. Without overthinking it, she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around Adriano in a gentle embrace. He stiffened in surprise at first, then slowly melted into it, his arms circling her, one hand cradling the back of her head. They stayed like that, offering quiet solace for shared pain. Elena's cheek pressed against his shoulder, his heartbeat steady in her ear. After a long moment, they parted slightly, faces inches apart. The tender atmosphere between them was electric. Adriano lifted a hand, hesitating before tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" she whispered. "For listening. For not seeing me as a monster." His eyes searched hers with aching vulnerability. Elena felt her breath catch. "I see a man who has a good heart caught in a bad situation," she said softly. "And I see someone who's risking everything to protect me. How could I see a monster?" Something shifted in his expression. Relief, gratitude, and affection all at once. His gaze dipped to her lips, then back up. Elena's pulse quickened, her own eyes drawn to his mouth. Was he going to kiss her? Did she want him to? Yes. The answer bloomed in her chest, undeniable and warm. As if reading her mind, Adriano began to lean in. Bang! The sudden clang of a pot in the kitchen clattering to the floor shattered the moment. Elena jolted slightly and Adriano pulled back, tension snapping into his posture out of instinct. A second later, Grazia's voice called, "Scusate! Sorry, just a pan, nothing to worry about." Elena let out a breathy laugh, half from nerves, half from amusement. I think my heart just stopped. Adriano ran a hand through his hair, chuckling under his breath. Mine too. He stood, offering a hand to help her up from the sofa. Come, let's eat. We both need our strength. They moved to the veranda where Grazia had set up a simple but inviting lunch. Fresh bread, tomato and mozzarella salad, cold pasta with olives and herbs, and a pitcher of lemon water. Elena hadn't realized how hungry she was until the aroma hit her. For the next hour they ate and talked lightly, avoiding heavy subjects for the moment. Adriano asked about her family, and Elena found herself telling him about her mother and younger sister in Messina, about how she'd moved to Palermo for work after her father passed away years ago. She shared a bit about her abandoned dance ambitions, how she taught a children's dance class as a volunteer on weekends when she could. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made her smile, like what her favorite dance was. Contemporary, though I love a good tango. Or if she still had her ballet shoes. Yes, in a box in my closet, though they probably don't fit. In turn, he spoke more about his childhood in Sicily, at least the happier parts. He pointed out an old fig tree in the yard that he used to climb with Lucia. He admitted he hadn't taken a real vacation or had a normal day off since assuming the mantle of boss. Elena gently scolded that he'd burn out, which made him grin. After this, perhaps I'll finally get a vacation, he mused, his gaze drifting to her meaningfully. After lunch, Grazia shooed them away from cleaning up, insisting they go relax. Adriano offered to show Elena around the estate. They wandered through the grove of lemon and olive trees, trailed at a respectful distance by one of his men as a guard. The afternoon sun slanted through the leaves, and for a little while, Elena felt almost like they were just two ordinary people on a stroll, not a mafia boss, and a waitress hiding from killers. They ended up at a scenic overlook beyond the villa's vineyard, where a stone balustrade marked the edge of the property. Below, rolling hills and patches of wildflowers stretched toward the glittering sea. Elena leaned on the cool stone, sighing in appreciation. It's so beautiful here. Peaceful. Adriano stood beside her, close enough that their arms nearly touched. I haven't been here in ages. I forgot how much I missed it. He glanced at her. Maybe I didn't have a reason to appreciate it until now. She met his eyes, a blush warming her cheeks. The sweet tension from earlier was still there between them, humming like an unspoken melody. Elena bit her lower lip gently, summoning courage from the tranquility around them. Adriano, earlier before we were interrupted. Her words faltered, but the slight widening of his eyes told her he knew exactly what she meant. He reached out, his fingers lightly covering hers on the sun-warmed stone railing. The contact sparked that familiar thrill. Elena, he said softly, voice earnest. I want to be honest with you. I am deeply drawn to you, but I also know these are hardly normal circumstances for either of us. I don't want to take advantage of your emotions when you're frightened or vulnerable. Elena's heart swelled at his consideration. I won't pretend I'm not scared, she replied, turning her hand under his so their palms met. But what I feel when I'm with you, it isn't just gratitude or fear. She took a breath. I think under different circumstances, if we had met some other way, I would still feel this pull toward you. A soft breeze ruffled Adriano's dark hair as he absorbed her words. He stepped in front of her, gently lifting her hand to his chest, pressing it over his heart. She felt it beating strong and fast. This is what you do to me, he confessed in a near whisper. I've been numb for so long, focused only on survival and revenge. You changed that in a matter of days. Elena's eyes brimmed with emotion. In the quiet of the afternoon, with nothing but the cicadas and distant waves as witnesses, the two of them closed the gap. This time nothing interrupted. Adriano cupped her cheek softly, and Elena tilted her face up as he bent down. Their lips met in a gentle, searching kiss. It was warm and firm and sent a cascade of heat from Elena's lips to her toes. She exhaled against him, her free hand curling into his shirt as he deepened the kiss just a little. There was a tenderness guided by caution, as if both were savoring something fragile and precious. When they finally parted, Elena felt dizzy in the best way. Adriano rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that, he murmured. She laughed lightly, joy bubbling up despite everything. Probably no longer than I've wanted you to. He smiled, a genuine, bright smile that transformed his face. The weight he carried seemed to lift in that moment, and she saw just a man in love. Not a Mafia don. The realization hit her squarely. Yes, love. It felt sudden and yet inevitable. They lingered in each other's arms as the sun started its descent, until Rocco coughed politely from a distance to announce his presence. Adriano sighed and pressed a quick, reassuring kiss to Elena's temple before turning. Rocco approached with an apologetic but urgent expression. I'm sorry to break this up, boss, Rocco said, discreetly not commenting on the intimate scene he'd just walked in on. But we have news. Our contacts picked up chatter that Barone is furious his men bungled the grab. Word is he's regrouping, possibly planning something bigger. We also got a tip that one of our own might have leaked your location last night. Adriano tensed, slipping back into business effortlessly, though he kept hold of Elena's hand. Who? Rocco grimaced. Not confirmed, but Enzo from our port crew went AWOL this morning. He's a suspect for feeding Barone intel. Luca is tracking him. Adriano cursed under his breath. Elena squeezed his hand in support. What does this mean now? She asked softly. It means we can't stay complacent, Adriano answered, eyes hardening with resolve. Barone's pride is wounded. He'll come after me, and he'll try to use any means to draw me out. He looked at her with determination. He still thinks you're his best bait. That gives us an edge, because he doesn't know you're secure. Elena felt a chill at the idea that she was still very much a target. What will you do? Adriano gazed toward the horizon, jaw set. I'm going to end this once and for all. I've been on the defensive, reacting to Barone's moves. It's time to take the fight to him. A sliver of fear lanced through Elena at the steely finality in his tone. End this. She knew what that likely entailed. Confronting Barone directly. Violence that could claim one of their lives. I'm coming with you, she said immediately. Both men looked at her in surprise. Adriano shook his head. Elena, no. I brought you here to keep you away from him. She stepped in front of him, placing her hands on his crossed arms. You plan to lure him out somehow, don't you? Likely using me as the bait he expects. If you go without me, he'll find another way, or someone could get hurt in my stead. Adriano's eyes flashed with protective refusal. I can't put you in danger deliberately. Absolutely not. Frustration and love warred within Elena. She raised a hand to his cheek. Adriano, listen. You told me Lucia always got involved when you were in trouble, yes? If she were here and if I were in her place, would you really expect her to sit safe and idle while you march into a deadly situation? That struck a chord. Adriano's expression faltered. Elena pressed on gently. I'm not a child. I choose to help. I couldn't bear waiting here not knowing if you'd come back alive. Please. A tense silence followed. Adriano's inner conflict was clear on his face. Finally, he closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. I don't like it, he murmured, but his next words showed acquiescence. We'd have to control every variable. The second things turn, you get to safety. Promise me that. I promise, she agreed readily, relief flooding her voice. Rocco scratched his chin. We could spread word through our channels that Elena left the villa, maybe tried to return home or go somewhere public. The mole, if there is one, or Barone's spies will take the bait. Then we arrange a meeting on our terms. Adriano finished grimly. Somewhere I choose, and I'll make sure Barone comes thinking he has the upper hand. His arm tightened around Elena's waist protectively. He won't touch you, I swear. Elena nodded, heart pounding, not sure if it was from fear of what was to come, or the resolve that she'd be facing it with Adriano together. They spent the next hours concocting the plan. Messages were subtly leaked that Elena, distraught and unwilling to stay hidden, had convinced Adriano to let her return to Palermo under guard to retrieve some personal belongings, an excuse for her to be en route and vulnerable. They knew Barone had ears in the city. The rumor would reach him soon. The chosen site for the confrontation was an abandoned winery on the outskirts of the city. Neutral ground, plenty of cover, and far from civilians. Adriano's men would stage a motorcade transporting Elena, but in reality, she'd only be in one car with Adriano, while other vehicles acted as decoys. Additional loyal men would be positioned ahead of time at the winery, lying in wait for an ambush. As evening fell, Elena changed into dark, unobtrusive clothing, jeans, sneakers, and a black sweater, ready for whatever might happen. She carefully tucked her hair into a low braid for less to grab, remembering how the thug had caught her by the ponytail. In the mirror, she barely recognized the determined woman staring back. Fear was there, yes, but also a fierce sense of purpose. She would not let the man she loved face this alone, and if she could help end the threat to both of them, she would. Adriano entered the bedroom as she finished. He too had changed into black cargo pants and a fitted dark shirt, a gun holstered at his side. The transformation from villa companion to battle commander was striking, but when he came up behind her and rubbed her shoulders gently, she saw the same caring man in his reflection. Are you absolutely certain about this? He asked quietly, meeting her eyes in the mirror. The doubt and worry there was solely for her safety. Elena turned to face him, standing on tiptoe to plant a soft kiss on his lips. I am. She forced a small smile. Besides, I still owe Baroni for ruining my favorite work shoes last night. Adriano huffed a breath of wry amusement and cupped her face. Stay close to me the entire time. Rocco and Sandra will cover our flanks. The moment I tell you to run, you run, understood? She would have argued, but the anguish in his tone stopped her. Understood, she agreed. It was fully dark by the time they departed the villa in 2 cars. Elena sat in the back with Adriano in an SUV driven by Sandro, while Rocco led the way in another vehicle with 2 more men. The convoy took a circuitous route to ensure they weren't obviously heading to the winery until the last moment. As they neared the location, adrenaline coursed through Elena. Adriano squeezed her hand. I won't let him touch you, he reiterated for the dozenth time. I know, she replied, squeezing back. We'll get through this, together. They exchanged a look of steadfast love and resolve. Whatever happened tonight would determine their future, whether they had one at all. The winery loomed up ahead, a cluster of old stone buildings and large storage sheds surrounded by fallow vineyards and rusting winemaking equipment. The area was isolated, accessible by only 2 roads. It had been abandoned for years. Sandro killed the headlights as they rolled through an open gate. The moon provided a faint glow as he parked near a loading dock. Rocco's car was hidden a bit further back, meant to appear as if it was standing guard at a distance. Meanwhile, about a dozen of Adriano's trusted men were concealed around the property, behind walls, in an empty water tower, and along the tree line. Elena's heart thudded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Adriano gave her one last reassuring look and helped her out of the car. He leaned on her more than he probably needed to, milking the moment with a playful smirk until pain made him grimace again. She rolled her eyes but smiled despite herself, nerves thrumming under her skin. Focus, tough guy. Yes, ma'am, he teased softly, but then his expression turned serious. They waited in the shadows of the loading dock, behind an old stack of wine barrels. One of the Falcone men signaled via radio that 2 vehicles were approaching from the south road. The bait had been taken. Adriano's jaw tightened. He pulled Elena a step behind him, his hand hovering near his holster. Rocco quietly moved to guard Elena's other side. They would let Barone come in enough to be surrounded. Engines grew louder, then cut off. Car doors slammed. Elena strained her ears and could make out multiple footsteps crunching on gravel. Her fingers found the back of Adriano's shirt, gripping lightly. He reached behind with his free hand and gave her leg a comforting pat without taking his eyes off the darkness ahead. A voice echoed, sharp and taunting. Falcone! I know you're here. Come out, wherever you are! It had a lilt of cruel amusement. Adriano stepped forward from cover, signaling his men to hold. Elena and Rocco stayed just behind the threshold of shadow. Under the moonlight, she could see the enemy now. Vincenzo Barone stood amidst a half-circle of his armed cronies near the center of the courtyard. He was a lanky man in his 40s with slicked-back graying hair and a snake-like grin on his face. In his hand, he held a handgun pointed casually at nothing in particular. Behind him were at least 8 men, all armed, scanning the area. Barone, Adriano greeted coldly, emerging with deliberate calm. You must be desperate coming out of your hole in person. Barone let out a harsh laugh. Desperate? No, my boy. I'd say opportunistic. His eyes gleamed as they roved, undoubtedly looking for Elena. Word was your little waitress insisted on a day trip. Where is she, Didn't grow tired of her already, did you? Adriano's stance remained composed, but Elena knew him well enough now to sense the coiled fury beneath. She's somewhere you'll never get to her. Barone tutted, wagging his gun. Now that's disappointing. I was hoping to meet the girl who softened the infamous Falcone. Perhaps I'd even show her what a real man looks like once you're gone. Elena's stomach turned at his vile insinuation. Before she could stop herself, she stepped out of the shadows into the open, chin raised high. Be careful what you wish for, Barone. You're meeting her now. Elena, no. Adriano hissed, but it was too late. She'd drawn Barone's full attention. The mob boss's eyebrows shot up in surprise, then delight as he saw her. There she is. Such brave stupidity, he sneered. He gestured grandly with his free hand. Come here, girl. I promise I won't bite. Much. Adriano moved swiftly, positioning himself in front of Elena as she advanced a few steps. Weapons on both sides were now raised, tension skyrocketing. This ends tonight, Baron, Adriano declared, voice ringing against the stone walls. You've spilled enough blood. You wanted me, here I am. Let her walk away, and we settle this between us. Baroni threw his head back and cackled. Chivalry from a mafioso, how quaint. You think I'd let my leverage just stroll off? No, Falcone. I think I'll keep her. Maybe as a souvenir after I put a bullet in you. He leveled his gun at Adriano, eyes gleaming with madness. Then again, maybe I'll start by ruining that pretty face of hers in front of you. Just for fun. Elena's pulse pounded in her ears. Despite the fear, she kept her gaze fierce. Big words from a coward who brings an army to kidnap an innocent woman. Baron's face twisted. He clearly wasn't used to being insulted, especially not by someone like her. You've got spirit. I can see why he likes you. Perhaps I'll break you in nice and slow. Enough, Adriano roared, fury emanating off him. To Elena's astonishment, he holstered his pistol and stepped forward with arms slightly away from his sides, almost like an invitation. You want to kill me, Baron? Then do it. But you leave her out of it. That's the deal. Time seemed to slow. Baron's men glanced at each other uncertainly. Baron himself faltered for a split second, perhaps shocked by Adriano's sudden surrender. But then his lips curled and he trained his gun fully on Adriano's chest. Gladly. Any last words, Falcone? Elena's heart seized. No, what was Adriano doing? This wasn't the plan, he was exposing himself. She realized he had signaled Rocco with a subtle hand movement behind his back. Something was about to happen. Adriano stared down his enemy. Only one, now. It took Elena a split second to realize that last word wasn't meant for Baron. It was a command to his hidden snipers. A split second too late. Baron understood as well. He jerked his head up just as a shot rang out from the darkness above. One of Barone's men yelped and went down, hit by a sniper's bullet from the water tower. Chaos erupted. Ambush! One of Baron's soldiers cried, firing blindly toward where he thought the shot came from. In that same moment, Adriano lunged backward and to the side, knocking Elena down behind a stack of old crates. He drew his own gun in a flash. The courtyard exploded in gunfire. Muzzle flashes strobed the dark as Adriano's concealed men opened fire from their positions. Baron's crew scattered for cover, returning shots wildly. Rocco dragged Elena further behind the crates, shielding her as splinters flew, one of Baron's bullets chewing into the wood inches from her head. Elena's ears rang with the noise. She clutched Rocco's arm, terrified but trying to keep her wits. Through the cracks between crates, she could see brief glimpses. Adriano rolling behind an old metal vat, firing with calm precision, and taking down another of Baron's gang who had rushed forward. Baron ducking behind a stone pillar, fury contorting his features as he fired off shots at shadows. Within half a minute, several of Baron's men were down or wounded, thanks to the element of surprise and superior positioning. It seemed the fight would end swiftly. But Baron, like a cornered viper, was not done. Fall back! He shouted to his remaining men. There were only 3 left standing with him. As one, they began a retreat toward their vehicles, shooting suppressive fire toward Adriano's side. One tossed a smoke grenade which began spewing a cloud of thick white smoke, obscuring the open ground. Elena coughed, eyes watering as the acrid smoke began to blanket the area. She felt Rocco's grip on her shoulder. Stay here, he barked, before moving off to coordinate the pursuit. Through the haze, Elena's heart sank when she saw Adriano rise from cover and charge after Barone, disappearing into the smoke. No, he was running straight ahead, with only Sandro on his heels. The others were circling around to cut off exits, but Adriano, always the one to take the direct route, was diving headlong. Impulsively, Elena scrambled up, ignoring the shouted command from one of Adriano's men to stay down. She skirted along the edge of the smoke, using the crates and barrels as cover, trying to catch sight of Adriano or Barone. Her ears picked up the scuffle of footsteps and a grunt just beyond a low wall. As the smoke thinned slightly, she saw them, Adriano and Barone, locked in a vicious struggle near the parked cars. Both had lost their guns on the ground and were grappling hand to hand. Barone's lanky form belied wiry strength. He slashed with a gleaming knife, catching Adriano's upper arm. Adriano hissed, dark blood staining his sleeve, but he threw a heavy punch to Barone's gut in return, then a strike across his jaw. Barone stumbled back against a car, spitting blood. Elena spotted the pistol Adriano had dropped a few feet away from the brawl. Instinct overrode everything. She dashed from her cover to grab it, fingers curling around the grip. It felt heavy, alien in her hand, but she forced her trembling arms to raise it as she edged closer. The two men struggled fiercely. Barone lunged, knife aimed at Adriano's heart. Adriano barely twisted aside. The blade sliced his side instead. With a feral growl, Adriano slammed Barone down onto the hood of the car, trying to pin his knife arm. Barone's eyes, wild with rage, flicked over Adriano's shoulder and landed on Elena with the gun. A twisted grin split his face despite the blood dribbling from his lip. "Go on then, ragazza," he taunted breathlessly. "Shoot us both, eh? That's what it'll take to stop me." Elena's hands shook violently as she aimed at the writhing figures. She couldn't get a clear shot without risking Adriano. Barone's free hand clawed at the ground and found his fallen gun. Before Elena could react, he pointed it not at Adriano but at her. Time froze in a sickening instant. Elena saw his finger tighten on the trigger, felt the spike of terror. "No!" Adriano roared. With a desperate surge of strength, he yanked Barone's knife arm back and bashed it against the windshield, forcing the crime boss to drop the blade with a howl. But Barone's other hand was steadying the gun, and he squeezed the trigger. Elena flinched, expecting pain, death, but Adriano had thrown himself into the line of fire. The gunshot cracked. Adriano jerked as the bullet meant for her hit him. A strangled sound escaped his throat, but he didn't fall. Fueled by adrenaline and love, he wrenched Barone's wrist, slamming it onto the hood, again and again, until the gun flew free, and Barone screamed in agony. Now effectively disarmed, Barone thrashed, trying to slide off the hood to escape. But Adriano wasn't going to give him another chance. With a snarl, he delivered a powerful elbow to Barone's face, dazing him, then wrapped an arm around his throat from behind, dragging him off the car and onto the gravel. Barone gagged and struggled uselessly, his face turning red. Elena stood in shock, the pistol limp in her grip, as she watched Adriano subdue the man who had caused so much pain. It was nearly over. "Adriano!" she cried out, finding her voice. "You're hit!" She dared move closer now that Barone was at a clear disadvantage. Indeed, Adriano's left shoulder was wet with blood from the bullet wound or graze, and his earlier knife cuts oozed crimson. Yet he held Barone firmly in a chokehold, fury etched in every line of his face. Barone's eyes bulged. He clawed weakly at Adriano's arm. "This is for my father," Adriano growled in his ear. "For Lucia. For everything," Elena's heart thundered. She realized with a cold certainty that Adriano might kill Barone right here, barehanded. And a part of her wanted him to, for all the terror and hurt this man had wrought. But another part, her soft heart, didn't want Adriano to carry the weight of yet another death on his soul, even this devil's. She rushed forward and laid a hand on Adriano's uninjured arm. "Adriano," she said urgently, looking up into his eyes, which were nearly unrecognizable in their wrath. "It's over. He's done. You won." For a beat, Adriano didn't respond, his muscles taut with the desire to end Barone's life. Barone's struggles grew weaker. He was on the verge of unconsciousness. Gently, Elena brought her hand to Adriano's face, turning him to meet her gaze. Her eyes pleaded, "You're not a murderer in cold blood. Not in front of me. Please." Something flickered in Adriano's expression. Elena's voice cutting through the red haze of vengeance. With a ragged breath, he relented. He released Barone, who collapsed to the ground in a coughing, gasping heap. Immediately, two of Adriano's men rushed in from the sidelines, guns drawn to cover Barone. One kicked away the fallen weapons, and another hauled the defeated mob boss onto his knees, binding his hands behind his back with a zip tie. Barone was too spent to resist, wheezing and shaking, his face a mask of hatred and shock at his loss. Adriano swayed on his feet. Elena tossed the pistol aside and reached for him just as his strength gave out and he dropped to one knee. "Adriano!" She guided him gently to sit against the side of the car. Blood was soaking his shirt in two places. Panic rose in her chest. "You're hurt badly." He managed a weak grin, teeth stained with a bit of blood from biting his lip. It's not so bad," he rasped, though his wince betrayed him. "Bullet just grazed me, I think. Knife was a close call, but I'll live." Sandro and Rocco converged on them, Rocco already pulling out a field bandage from a pouch. "We need a medic, boss." "I'll call Grazia to ready supplies at the villa," Sandro said, stepping away to radio for the car and alert home base. Adriano's hand found Elena's and gripped it. "Elena, are you okay?" His voice was strained, concerned for her even now. Fresh tears filled her eyes, but they were of relief. "I'm fine," she whispered. "You saved me. Again." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss there, eyes full of love and exhaustion. "I promised." She couldn't help a soft laugh mixed with a sob. "Yes, you did." Tenderly, she brushed a damp lock of hair from his brow. "And I promised to dance with you when all this was over, remember? So you have to be okay." Adriano smiled, leaning into her touch. "I will be. With you by my side, I will be." Rocco finished staunching the bleeding with temporary dressings. Sirens sounded in the far distance. Someone must have reported the firefight, but by the time authorities arrived, they'd find nothing but a few tied-up thugs and discarded weapons. Adriano's people would ensure their own were long gone, and Barone delivered to a fate of their choosing, perhaps handed off to a certain police sergeant with evidence of his crimes, or quietly confined until a decision was made. Adriano had yet to say, but Elena suspected mercy was more likely now. For her, the only thing that mattered was that they were alive and together. As Rocco and the others discreetly hustled to clear the scene, Elena helped Adriano stand and supported him to the SUV. He leaned on her more than he probably needed to, milking the moment with a playful smirk until pain made him grimace again. She swatted his good arm lightly. "Oh, now you're enjoying this, He chuckled, wincing only a little. "Maybe just a bit. Having a beautiful woman fuss over me is a novelty." Elena rolled her eyes but slid an arm around his waist, mindful of his injuries. "Just get in the car, signore," she teased. "Yes, ma'am," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head as she helped him into the back seat. He hissed as he settled, but when she buckled his seatbelt gently, he caught her hand and kissed her knuckles. "Thank you, Elena, for everything." She felt her heart swell. "Thank you. Now let's go home." Soon they were on their way back to the villa under the cover of night, leaving behind the smoke and chaos for the last time. Dawn's first light filtered soft and pink through the bedroom curtains. Elena stirred awake to the unfamiliar comfort of a plush mattress and the familiar warmth of Adriano beside her. After returning to the villa the night before, there had been a flurry of activity, cleaning and stitching Adriano's wounds, 2 shallow knife gashes and a nasty graze on his shoulder, phone calls to tie up loose ends, and finally a tearful call to Elena's mother assuring her that the bad people had been caught and she was safe. By the time the adrenaline faded, Elena had practically collapsed into bed, not letting Adriano out of her sight. He insisted she take the bed while he would rest on the chaise, but she refused to let him be uncomfortable with his injuries, and somehow ended up curled gently at his good side, her head on his chest. They both had fallen into a deep, healing sleep within minutes. Now morning had come, bringing with it a serene quiet. Birds chirped outside. Elena carefully propped herself up on one elbow to gaze at Adriano. His face, free of tension, looked years younger. She felt a swell of affection and desire for the peaceful life they could now hope for. As if sensing her, Adriano's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, caution flashed through them, a soldier waking from war. But then they focused on her face and softened with tranquility. "Buongiorno," he said, voice husky with sleep. "Buongiorno," she replied, smiling. "How do you feel?" He shifted slightly, testing his bandaged shoulder and side. "Sore, but I'll be fine. Nothing a week's rest won't cure." He trailed a finger along her arm. "How about you? You're safe now. It's over." Elena nodded, emotion catching in her throat at the words. It was truly over. "It feels almost unreal, like I can breathe freely for the first time since that moment I heard that gunshot in the restaurant." He took her hand and kissed it. "I'm sorry you had to go through all of it, but I can't say I'm entirely sorry it happened, because it brought me you." Her heart melted. She leaned down and kissed him softly. "I feel the same way. Though perhaps next time let's meet somewhere nice and boring." Adriano chuckled, wincing only a little. "Deal. No more gunfights at dinner." He grew a bit more serious, eyes searching hers. "Elena, you know my life isn't typical. Even with Barone gone, there are complications. But I meant what I said. I want a future away from that life, or at least transformed into something I can be proud of." Elena remembered their earlier conversations. "Have you thought about what you'll do? Will you leave the family business?" He exhaled. "I spoke with Luca last night after you fell asleep. He's going to handle the day-to-day for now. Most of our people just want stability, not endless feuds. With Barone's faction dismantled, There's a chance to broker peace among any remaining rivals, perhaps even turn our operations legitimate, as much as possible. I have some legitimate enterprises, shipping, real estate. I could focus on those. Elena stroked his hair, admiration filling her. I think that's a wonderful plan. You could finally get that vacation you deserve in between business meetings. He grinned. About that? Do you have any interest in traveling? Because I have an entire world to see outside of Sicily, and I'd rather not see it alone. Her eyes sparkled. I've always wanted to travel, and I can't think of better company. Good. Adriano carefully sat up a little more, cupping her cheek. First, we'll get you back to Palermo to collect anything you need and let your family know you're all right in person. I'll have security on you, just as a precaution. She raised an eyebrow, and he amended with a chuckle. All right. Maybe I'm just paranoid. But humor me for a bit. Elena laughed softly. Fine, but then, where shall we go? Name a place. Any place. Adriano pretended to ponder, then said, There's a small villa on Lake Como I own. Completely quiet and breathtaking views. It's been empty for years. We could start there, just you and me. No interruptions. She liked the sound of that. And after? Wherever you want. Maybe Paris. You could dance with me under the Eiffel Tower at night. He mused playfully. Elena's eyes lit up. I'd love that. But you'd better practice your waltz. He smirked. For you, I'll even take tango lessons. They shared a warm laugh, followed by a gentle kiss, sweet with the promise of tomorrow. A soft knock came at the door. Grazia's voice filtered through. I have breakfast and coffee for you two lovebirds if you're decent. Elena blushed and called out, Come in, Grazia. The door opened, and the kindly housekeeper entered with a tray loaded with coffee, pastries, and fruit. She beamed, seeing them both awake and sitting close. Look at this, what a beautiful morning. You both have color in your cheeks again. How do you feel, Adriano Caro? Like I could use one of those cornetti, he said with a grin. And I feel good, Grazia. Better than I have in a long time. As Grazia fussed over his bandages briefly, and then left them to eat, Elena realized it was the first morning in memory she wasn't dreading something. She felt free and deeply in love. They enjoyed breakfast in bed, feeding each other bites and sneaking kisses between sips of rich coffee. Plans and daydreams flowed easily. It felt as if the shadow that had loomed over both of them had finally lifted. At one point, Elena turned on the small radio on the bedside table to a music station. A cheerful Italian love song played, filling the room. Adriano set down his cup and extended a hand to her, eyes twinkling. May I have this dance? Elena laughed, glancing at his bandaged torso. Here? Now? You need to rest. But he was already sliding out of bed, and with only a slight wince, stood tall and proud. I'll survive one dance, he insisted gallantly. We have a tradition to start. You danced for me once and changed my life. Now, I want to dance with you and start our new one. Tears pricked Elena's eyes at his words. She allowed him to pull her up. They stood together in the golden morning light that streamed through the window, the music wrapping around them. Carefully, Adriano placed a hand at her waist. She rested hers on his uninjured shoulder. With unspoken agreement, they began to sway. It wasn't a perfect waltz or a tango. It was just theirs. Slow, tender steps, foreheads sometimes touching, smiles never fading. Elena hummed along to the melody, her soul light. She realized in that moment that for all the fear and danger, she would not change a thing that had led her here. Life had a mysterious way of bringing people together at just the right time. A soft-hearted waitress and a hardened Mafia boss, an unlikely pair who found love in the midst of bullets and chaos. As the song came to an end, Adriano spun her gently and then drew her in for a deep, loving kiss. When they parted, he whispered against her lips, Ti amo, Elena. Her heart danced. It was the first time he'd said those words, and she knew he meant them with every fiber of his being. Ti amo, Adriano, she whispered back, caressing his cheek. Outside, the day beckoned with clear skies and endless possibilities. But for now, they stayed wrapped in each other's arms, savoring the peace they had fought so hard to earn. Whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together. The waitress and the Mafia boss, no longer adversaries in a dangerous world, but partners forging a new path to a life of love, safety, and the kind of joy that made them want to dance every single day. And dance they would, ever grateful that a simple, spontaneous moment had intertwined their fates and led them to this beautiful new beginning.